tomorrow is the opening ceremonies.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we're having a party. We're going to be doing a little French hors d'oeuvres. Is that a French word?
You're having a party for the Olympics?
Hors d'oeuvres.
Hors d'oeuvres. There's not a B. Okay. I don't think there's a B in that word.
Well, in the South there is. Okay.
Hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah. So, man, I mean, track is always great.
Yeah, track's fine, right?
Track's good.
You're running fast.
They have like the diving. That's always pretty.
You know what's fun to watch is the pole vaulters, the high jumpers,
shot putters.
Yeah,
javelin throw.
Now we're gonna have a similar experience in high school. We didn't have a track team, but we wanted to get off school for a day.
Yes.
So we all had to kind of look down the list and go, I guess I could do that.
We had one tournament. Remember that?
That's right.
One district tournament.
Yep.
And you're just like, all right. Everybody pick a sport.
Just pick one. Pick one. Like, tomorrow you got to do it.
Get the most athletic guy and be like, you pick first.
Yeah.
Which one can you win?
What did you pick?
I can't remember. I did go, but I can't remember really competing in anything.
You didn't pick one?
I think I went. Maybe I didn't go. Maybe I was the one that was like, they all go. I'll also get a free day because I'm the only one at school.
Right. So I picked the 2 mile.
I think it was always was it always at Glenbrook in Minden?
Whoever had a track. Yeah. It was probably only one school.
It's all grown up.
I remember there was a guy from your school.
Okay.
And I entered the 2 mile because that was the only thing I could do, really. Yeah. You know, I got the endurance.
Yeah.
And I remember he lapped me maybe twice.
Well, hey, look, if we're talking about Trinity Heights athletics.
No, he was very good.
That 2 miler.
He was very, very good.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think there were some people that were really good at that kind of stuff and nobody knew. Because we didn't have that, right? Like you can't really display it.
But
around the parking lot, maybe.
I just stopped counting. I mean, how many times is it? 6, 7, 8?
I think going around the track.
I think it's 8.
4 times is 1 mile.
Right. Yeah. So I was demolished, but I did get a day off school.
Yeah. Well, it's whatever your scoreboard looks like. Okay. And if that's your main metrics, you won.
I did win.
You got the goal.
I won that day.
You won that day.
Man, coming off of a high here for the pod.
Meeting with the mayor?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on after meeting with the mayor?
No, I mean, I think that there are some exciting things happening coming up in Bossier. It is nice, I always make a joke anytime, me and Laurie like to travel and we like to go to big cities, but every time we pull into a city, especially in Texas, you see cranes everywhere, right? And so I'm like, all right, there's first crane. We're still 30 minutes away from Dallas. There's a crane, right? Yeah. And so it's funny because I was driving through the other day and saw a crane at that new casino. And I was like, there you go, we got a crane.
We have
Didn't
one
you know
crane.
We had one around here? We have one. You have to share it. Get in line, okay?
It's like, we're going to rent this for the rest of the year. Anybody else who needs it,
yes.
Get in there. Get in there.
But yeah, I think that in Shreveport and Bossier, it's really hard to separate the two, I mean, it's just so, and it is crazy because they're both officials making decisions for their city, and it really does affect the other city.
Well, that's right.
And so there really does need to be some kind of, and I told him I wouldn't get into anything really political, so I didn't want to dive into that much, but there really does need to be some commonality, some shared vision between the two people in power to really do some things, And then it's kind of like, well, is 4 years enough to really do much, If you're talking about, changing who's in power, but then is it fair to have somebody there for, 16 years?
So,
I don't know.
So this is, Xi Jinping. I mean, this guy's just going to roll for like 40 years, but he didn't have to change his program.
I didn't want to bring it up, but they did actually. He actually supports term limits.
He does.
He does.
Okay.
He signed a thing this week, a petition saying he supports term limits
for himself,
for Bossier. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think the previous person was just he was FDR in it.
I'm just gonna roll.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey.
But I don't know that you get a mixed feeling on that, and this is getting probably wading off into the weeds. But you're right, 4 years. particularly on the national level, you get 4 years of this side, 4 years of this side, just ping pong back and forth, and you don't really ever get to develop a cohesive vision. Now, maybe you need that ebb and flow to rein in the worst impulses, but ultimately, is it more successful to just have a cohesive vision?
Yeah, I mean, well, I just like to put in perspective, right? Like, y'all just opened the Blanchard store.
Yes.
How long did it get to the day that the doors open? How long was that journey?
5 years, if not more.
To open one store. And I'm not belittling that. I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's a big venture.
Sure.
But you think of running a city.
Right.
How much can you do in 4 years?
I know.
You know what I'm saying? It's tough.
It is tough.
And so, and then it's just politics is used for a reason, like the word politics, right? And you say, oh, well, you're being political about it. You know what that means, right? People are jostling for their opinion to be taken. And, if you don't take then you got to choose sides and all this stuff. And it's like what's lost in the shuffle, right, is that a true servant or a true ambassador for a vision is we're doing whatever it takes to fulfill this vision, not we're doing whatever it takes for our idea to get picked.
To retain power.
Yeah.
You get somebody who comes in and is just super competent and is just killing it, and is doing the right things, moving in the right direction, and then 4 years is up and he's got to go. Yeah. And then the next person comes in and they're just not nearly as qualified or talented. And so I think we're subject to that to a degree.
Or they have aspirations for more, right? It's a stepping stone. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to be in charge of the city for 4 years, and I'm going to go to the next thing.
We've seen some of that.
We have seen some of that. And it's just kind of like, but here's the deal. I mean, I think that nothing's really hidden at this point with social media. And I think that most of, especially our generation, we feed off of authenticity. And when we don't see it, we know it, right? Sure. And so I think that you just kind of see as time goes, the more and more prevalent the voter base is going to be looking through that lens,
Well, we hope, right? So the information is clear enough.
And you think of this too. I remember when I was real young, I was at some city. I was like 21 years old, living in this small town, and these people that I knew that were really strong with one political party supported the mayor of this little small town that was with a different political party. And they were like, well, when you talk about local politics, parties really don't matter that much. And I'm like, oh man, you are you're a hypocrite, right? Yeah. Then I think about it, and I'm like, well, there is some truth to that, right? Yeah. I mean, obviously there are some things and some different ideologies, but they don't really affect a local level, right? Ideologies might not really matter a whole lot when it comes to developing businesses or supporting a business or bringing in infrastructure, So. Maybe so, though. I don't know. The pandemic did maybe change my thoughts on some of that.
Well, sure.
Because, it was crazy. What was crazy was in Shreveport-Bossier, you could go into Shreveport, all the restaurants are shut down, or you're having to sit outside, and you come to Bossier, and masks weren't really required, and everything was open.
It was a much more loose approach.
So maybe maybe it does matter on that, but
Well, there's no substitute for great governance locally, done with integrity, and I believe that Bossier is a beneficiary of a lot of that. Now everybody's got their problems, right? Sure. Everybody's got their problems. Nothing is perfect. Small business, we talk about this all the time of how you can have the best intentions, but then life happens. Yeah. But ultimately, I think that for this market, we do have to find a way to trumpet the good things, to try to bring in more economic engines for our area. For young people to want to come here, we're never going to be Dallas, and that's fine. Sure. We don't want to be Dallas. Sure. But ultimately, for young people, do they feel like this is a good place where they can settle in and settle down right now? Yeah. Maybe moving out to Benton with you, when you're mayor of Benton,
somebody told me the other day that's where the rich people live. So I was like, okay.
But you don't get to Benton like right away, right? In your 20s, you're not thinking, man, I'd love to move to Benton.
I never had one person being shocked that I live in Benton. Oh, Benton, that's where the rich people live. I'm like, Benton. So, but I will say, I think it depends on what your goal is, right? Because, I think early on, in business, people out of college, and even me in my 20s and maybe early 30s, my goal was to, I want to get the biggest piece of the pie I can. I want to be known for my successes and my wins, right? And
You want to make a name.
yeah, then you have a family and your goal shifts, it's like, well, does that really matter, right? And so then you kind of change and so I would say depending on what your goal is in entrepreneurship or business ownership or ventures, it was much easier to make progress in this town than it would have been for me to go to Dallas.
I agree.
Even though, you see the shiny, oh man, look at all this, look at, you go in there and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a Lamborghini. I've only seen that on my poster, when I was in middle school, and now there's like 10 of them driving by me, right? Yeah. And you're kind of sucked into this, wow, this is the life I really want.
Right.
And it's like, is it really the life you want?
Yeah.
Or is it where you want to go for a weekend getaway
and
enjoy the luxuries, right? And then come back and have, cheaper cost of living, tighter knit neighborhoods, you still go into a grocery store and know people, right? So it really depends on what you really want. And so.
And 35 to 60, from those age brackets, life is totally different. In this market, it may take a long time for us to become great for 20-somethings, or we may never achieve it, maybe. Yeah. But ultimately, we know that for the 35 to 60-year-old crowd, that this is a pretty good place to live.
Yeah. If your goal is to be an influencer and to
hang out at the rooftop pool,
rooftop pools, and wear the latest designer fashion and drink the best drinks, might not be the place for you.
Right.
Okay. Might not be the place for you.
Yeah. But if you want good cost of living, good place to raise a family.
Yeah. Great schools.
Yep.
And so look, and I can get frustrated, because I can be like, well, we don't have the entertainment, and I'm guilty, and I'll admit that I've complained about this area before, right? But then it's like when I really sit down and think about what's my vision for my family, what's my vision for me, is a bigger city going to really help that or solve that?
No. Right? And every time, you probably experience the same thing. Every time we go to Dallas, and we do a few times a year, we want to see the Mavs game, we want to go to a concert. Yeah. You want some of those things, or you want to eat at a great restaurant. Yeah. And then you do it, and then on the way there, you're driving and you're like, this is miserable. Yeah. And on the way home, you're driving and you're like, I wouldn't want to do this. This is terrible. Yeah. Right? You feel the same way?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, and that really is a great thing about where we're at, right? You think about it. We are 3 hours from Little Rock, 3 hours from, I think that one time we were talking about going to NBA game, right? We're trying to pick. And I started looking at my Google Maps. We are 7 hours or less driving distance to 5 NBA teams, right? And that's just crazy to think about. Yeah. And it really is true. It is if you want to read my book on weekend getaways, you want to drop those kids off Friday.
That's right.
At school and leave town.
Just
don't wait till they get out of school and get them situated and do all that. You miss a whole.
You bake in that's your driving free time. Babysitting.
Yes. And so,
Genius.
You got to get that. You got to get that in. Yeah, it's in my book, chapter 3. Speaking of trips, next week I will be in Boston.
Wow.
20-year anniversary trip.
20 years. So why did you pick Boston?
So, there are a lot of places we want to go. A lot of places. One of our favorite pastimes is going to concerts, live shows. So usually when we're picking a place, the first thing we'll do is say, hey, what are shows, in this time frame, what are some concerts going on, right? Okay. And then we just kind of be like, oh, well, we've never been to this city, or this would be a cool city, or this would be a great show to go see we've never seen. So there happen to be 2 artists that we really like playing the same week in Boston. Back-to-back nights.
Conway Twitty.
And these are not small shows. I'll put it to you that way.
Okay.
These are, yes.
Well, I love it.
So the first show will be Zach Bryan.
I'm familiar.
Playing at Gillette Stadium.
Wow, it's big.
Yes, big.
It's a big room.
Big room.
Yeah.
Then the next night, Noah Khan playing at Fenway Park.
Really?
Yeah. 2 nights in a row.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a lot of.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, what's crazy is, and this is very weird, the stage at Fenway is set up in the outfield. So say if you're playing center field, that's where the stage is going to be.
Okay.
Between the stage and the infield, I said outfield, right?
Yeah.
Outfield. Between the stage and the infield, they have seats that they set up
On the grass.
On the grass. Dude, cheapest ticket's like $3,000 for these seats.
I feel like that can't be good for the grass, right? I mean, what do they do?
Then there's a gap. They do not have seating on the infield.
Okay.
And so most of the people are sitting between first and third around home plate,
Okay.
watching the stage.
Yeah.
There's just like a huge gap. So pretty interesting, huh?
That is.
Yeah.
That's just wild.
I get
Yeah.
they're still in the middle of the season. Like literally next week they play the Yankees for
Yeah.
3 days, so they can't mess up the infield. I guess is what it is. But you know, I've been to Rangers. I went to see the Chili Peppers at the Ranger Stadium. It was off season, and they just lay a plastic floor over the whole thing.
Right, that's what you think they would do,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know.
I don't know. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
So we'll see how it goes.
So
You know?
big concerts, and
Big
you're going to see
concerts.
some historical things.
You know, I'm a planner.
Are you?
know? Yeah, I have an itinerary. I have an itinerary. So what I like to do is I like to pick out restaurants.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and I do a deep dive on restaurants, buddy. I'm
Me
not
too.
gonna lie.
I love
Now,
diving
here's the
in that.
thing: if I can't make a reservation, we're not going
Okay.
because I'm not gonna go.
You don't want to roll the dice.
I don't want to roll the dice,
Right.
Because then you always, if it's we have a 2-hour wait, you're going to end up eating at Jimmy John's. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
And I don't want to spend
Yes.
an evening eating at Jimmy John's.
Right. Well, you live in Benton.
I love for lunch.
You don't have to.
So,
Big spender.
So, because you just get so hungry, it's like, well, what's the closest thing?
Right.
All right, let's take it. you
Yeah.
know? So I like to do the reservation. Then I have a secondary list. Okay, so I plan in pencil, loosely plan some stuff. Then I have a list of things, a bucket, if you will, that I can pull from if we have some downtime. Or we get hungry. We want a little snack,
Back
a little
up.
treat.
Yeah.
Right? I've already
Wow.
researched the best places. And I'm like, hey, we have a 3-hour gap. Here's some cool stores. Hey, there's a cool antique mall here. You want to go to that? You want to do
And you
this?
like to antique when you're out on the road
Well,
too.
well,
I've noticed this.
I'm still young. I mean, I'm middle aged. I'm not 60 yet, so we call it vintage shopping. Okay, I'm not going to call it antiquing.
Okay.
We'll call it vintage shopping.
And if you buy stuff, I guess you can't buy stuff that's only so big.
So we
you
went
can't
to
get it home.
Savannah one day, and we just we were building our house, and we had this idea of kind of what we wanted to have to go with our decor, which were some like brass, the brass figurines, like bookends, the animal.
Yeah.
And so we're in Savannah, and we walk in, and I mean, they just had, it was like the jackpot, right? Of these awesome like gold figures. Oh, this is so cool. This is cool. So we bought like a bunch of them, and 2 of the bookends were unicorns. They're brass unicorn figurines, and they were so cool. And we bought all these things, probably 5 or 6 of these things, and then we're like, hey, we fly out tomorrow. Do we ship these to our house? And we're like, oh, it's a Sunday. Nothing's open to ship. And so we just brought the bag on as a carry-on. Okay. And like the unicorn's horn was like sticking through the bag. We just ran it through, and they just let us on. I'm like, you can't bring a bottle of water on this plane, but I can bring a 50-pound piece of brass
unicorn.
Easily I could have taken that brass unicorn and taken over that plane easily.
Oh yeah, I didn't think
That's
about
what I'm saying.
I mean, just
that's what I'm saying.
Stab somebody with that thing.
Yeah. So
you can't bring a pocket knife.
So if we have any, I don't condone it, but if you are going to look at a way to get something to do some harm on a plane,
go antiquing.
Go antiquing. So here's what we like to do. Okay. So it is fun to go through, find stuff. But what I found is that every city just kind of has a different vibe on what they have at their antique places, right?
Okay.
Because it's different sports teams you'll find, different music genre type stuff. You'll find different clothing, if you will. So, when we go Fort Worth, it's just going to be a lot different than if we go, wherever else we go, somewhere in Georgia or Boston.
Yeah.
So it's fun stuff.
Nice.
It's a good time.
Well, man.
But it does make me feel old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
have y'all done antiquing? No, you don't do the antiquing.
no. But maybe it's something we could get into.
Hey, so the fun thing is, and we've done this with the bailiffs. You know, the fun thing is to go and try to find something to wear that night when you go out to either dinner or to the concert.
So this is at a vintage store,
Yeah,
or
like
is
a
this...
vintage store. You know, those vintage places.
Yeah.
They have clothing and hats and stuff. You know,
Okay.
but as you would imagine, you know, things made in the 50s and 60s weren't necessarily for someone that's 6'5", 300 pounds, right?
Right.
So I'm kind of limited to just hats. Hey, their heads were a lot smaller too, so
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on here.
Right.
But Shay, you know, just anything he wears just looks good.
Yeah.
He's a good-looking guy.
Good figure.
Swagger.
Yeah.
You know, just
Clothes just hang
the
on
presence.
him just
Yes.
right.
And so he's usually the only one that just buys.
Can
you know,
find something.
Oh yeah, this is like
Yeah.
this thing would look ridiculous on me, but he puts it on. You know, he's like,
There you
oh
go.
wow, how fashionable is this guy, right? So there we go. Shout out Shay.
Way to go, Shay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're here to talk about something you brought to the table.
Yeah.
So
So
you want to introduce it?
Yeah, so one of the books that I've read, I mean, I don't know, 10 years ago, was a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And, you know, anytime I have a young person in business or someone in business that's eager to learn and to grow, especially like in the real estate or the service industry, that's usually the book that I give out, you know. And his premise, I'll just get into kind of his premise, is you have... and stop me at any point, we can dig in. But he's going to say, you know, you have takers, right? So he has 3 categories. Takers. The takers are, they view the world as one giant pie, and their goal is to make their piece of the pie the biggest they can, right? You know, and what's crazy, the thought is that this pie is limited, right? There's not multiple pies. And so it's kind of a scarcity. It's this kind of a vigorness that comes out of a scarcity mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, well, you know, these guys are threatening what I have, right? They go into Enron and talk about Kenneth Lay. And one of the interesting things that's always stuck with me is they did this study on, you know, how like big companies have annual reports, right? If you have shareholders, you produce an annual report, and it's going to kind of lay through the numbers and all this stuff, right? Well, they did a study based off of the long-term success of businesses and how big the headshot of the CEO was in the annual report. Very interesting. So, Kenneth Lay at Enron, how big was his headshot?
2 pages.
It was,
It was just split.
it was like the book you get with a folder. It was
That's right.
The poster you fold out.
it's a 3. It's a 3. Yeah. Trifold.
Yeah, but it was a full page. Was his headshot
Full
right?
page.
The full page.
Just the head.
Just the head.
Okay.
CEO Kenneth Lay, right?
Okay.
And he was just using that as an example. And of course, this study goes on, and it's like proven that the smaller the CEO's headshot is, the more retention they have, the more success they have, the happier their employees are. Pretty interesting, right? So there's a great documentary, by the way, on the Enron guys. Have you ever watched that? Smartest Guys in the Room.
Okay.
It's great. Watch it.
All
Put
right.
it on your list.
Okay.
Really good stuff. So you have takers. The world is competitive. You know, and here's the thing with... it's not always that the takers are aggressive or evil, right? It's just that all of their dealings tend to be one-sided, right? And you know this. I mean, you're in business, right?
Yes.
And I've been able to notice this. And somebody will say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a deal with this person. What do you think about them? And I'm like, well, the deal might work great for you. What I've noticed is that they always get the better end of every deal they're in, right? So just be cautious about that.
Yeah, something jumps off the page when you're dealing with people, certain people, and you just know that they don't view this as a partnership.
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
It can be in the way they communicate with you or to you or about you.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that ideal customer relationship is somebody who understands that it is a partnership.
Yeah.
And I do need to get a great deal for my company, and we need to score some wins.
Yep.
But ultimately, you've got a team too.
Yeah.
You've got people that you need to be successful too, because
Yeah.
your success helps. We need to all be successful.
Sure.
And if it's just about me getting the best deal possible,
Sure.
and you're going out of business because of this,
Yeah. Yeah,
then is that worth
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, well, and I think that's it. I mean, and I know it's cliche to say, everyone wins, but, it really is whether it's 2 parties, 3 parties, 4 parties in a deal or transaction or whatever, but, we all have to win, right? And part of that is going into what's your main motivator,
Right.
Because a lot of time with takers, it's all just money.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, well, I'm just going to, and they view this as, well, to be successful, you have to one up in every transaction. That's how you get ahead.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily true, especially in a small town like we're in, right? Because you start doing that type of business, word gets around, now nobody wants to do business with you.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so it's this big picture of, could I squeeze a little bit more out of this transaction? Maybe. But I'm looking 30 years, right? And is this person going to be an advocate or a source for more business down the road?
Yeah.
And so do I want to just go push all my chips in the first deal and try to get the very best deal? Or do I see that this might be we could be a lot more successful together over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
Yeah. And I know you'll get into performance for givers and takers, but it just hit me that when you talk about that person who it's evident that they are a taker, and this is how they view all these relationships as zero sum, and they want to get the best for themselves in the deal. You can sense that. I mean, maybe they win a lot of these deals, most of them, maybe all of them.
Sure.
Maybe win them, but then you start to wonder, well, this person is not doing all of this work by himself. He has a team. And if he views the relationship from vendor partners as zero sum, then he also views that for his team members.
Oh, yeah.
And you start to notice a lot of churn
Yeah.
with those folks.
Yeah.
People come in, they go out. People come in, they go out. And there is, when you talk about performance overall, there's certainly a ceiling. And a lot of these people are very, very ambitious, so they're able to show the veneer of success, and they're able to do great things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, with that churn, it's almost like a bit of a glass ceiling that stops them from that next level.
Sure.
But I'll let you continue.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it doesn't always take the loudest person in the room or one of the examples they use in there is Michael Jordan. And, he was an idol of mine growing up, right? Because I was supposed to play in the NBA. My parents
Stretch
didn't buy me the right shoes, but they kind of use his as, when he was a player, he was a big advocate for this, for the union and this minimum pay wage for players, right? But then when he became an owner of an NBA team, he flipped, right, and didn't want to do that anymore. So I mean, that's just like an obvious, right? And so it's kind of like your opinions on things will flip-flop based off of the position you're in and how it will benefit you. Yep.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So then the second one obviously is givers, takers and givers, right? So givers, they're focused on helping group success, the others around them succeed. Their main focus is not the dollar, but rather the value. They don't get their energy and fuel from seeing growth in a balance sheet as much as they do as providing value to the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what fuels them to keep going. Their reward is helping others.
Yeah.
So,
and these people are easy to spot a mile away too.
we know those people. They're very few, right?
Yeah.
And I like to think that most times I am. That's what I aspire to be. I try to be that person.
Right.
But then I also find myself in areas, and I think that this isn't like a black and white discussion.
That's right.
I think that we can look at different things or different time periods in our life, or maybe even different circles we're in where we might take on this, a taker mentality
That's
because
right.
we feel threatened or our money's low, and now we shift this mindset to get into a scarcity mindset because we feel threatened.
Yeah.
I always think of, and I don't know if you ever had the chance to meet Jim Mosh here locally. He passed away about, I guess, maybe a year ago. And he grew a successful technology business, sold it, and he just helped so many restaurants in town, investing in restaurants and stuff. And it's funny is I probably met him about 10 years ago, and he was introverted, not always, trying to, but he just had such a huge impact because he was always helping, asking questions, he seemed to be very into whatever you were into, right? And very thankful for your success. Like there was nothing competitive about it. He wanted everybody to succeed. And that was just the type of person he was. You can see it, and it's funny because one of the lunches we were having, he said, "Hey, I just read this book, Give and Take. You should read it." And I was like, "Oh, I've read it. It's great." And so it just kind of resonated with him too, But anyways, yep. So any of our listeners, Jim Mosh, great guy, good legacy. Givers. So then he's going to say this is what the majority of people fall into is matchers. Okay, matchers. They have this tit for tat mentality. Is that if they get something, they feel compelled to give it back, right? And or if they give something, they expect that to give back, right? They want fairness about all parties. They don't want any kind of tilted side of I did more for you than you did for me or vice versa, right? And they are uncomfortable when it's not balanced. And I just had this discussion, right, with someone who has sent our business they've sent us a lot of business. And it is, and I'm all about returning favors and doing nice things, right? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But I don't go to the point where it stresses me out, right? Where it's like, hey, because I've been on the other end. I've given so much away with nothing in return. And I don't let it consume me, or I don't hold a grudge against that person, right? It's just, that's what I wanted to do, and I was excited to do that. I put two people together the other day. Somebody owns a current business and somebody's selling a business, and they kind of are in the same circles. And so I said, hey, y'all need to meet each other because you might want to buy this. And the guy that owns the business was like, hey, are you wanting to be a part of this? I was like, no, man, y'all just work something out. It'd be great for you, right? And so it's just kind of this mentality is like, I'm not looking for something in return, but that's our first reaction. What do you want for a return out of this?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so my point is, I've kind of come to a place where if someone sends me a lot of business, like I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, it's like they're probably just doing that because they want to help me out. They like me or they care about me, Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and what Adam seemed to suggest is that a lot of the matchers, or he said that sometimes matchers are people who just are burned from giving, and they flip into a matching role because, over time, they've just felt used.
Yes,
and so
and
then
that
we
is a
move into-
big concern for givers is getting taken advantage of.
Yeah. Now, I alluded to this earlier, but the performance. So he went out and studied groups of engineers and salespeople and some others, and he was trying to find out who performed the best. Was it the givers? Was it the takers? It's a pretty interesting revelation, right? You want to get into that?
Yeah, I think that they just said that it tends to be the salesmen in a long-term span. People in sales, the ones that go to the top and stay at the top are usually givers.
And also, they are at the bottom.
They are at the bottom. Yes.
So the lowest performing salespeople
Correct.
are givers.
Yep.
And then the highest performing salespeople are
Yep.
givers. Takers
Yep.
are not the highest performing. So what do you think that they're the lowest and the highest?
I honestly think it's I think that part of it is, just life lessons you learn, right? Like if I'm a giver and I get taken advantage of, like you said, you could go into being a matcher. But if you stay this giving, you're just more aware. So maybe I would say the difference probably would be self-awareness or awareness of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that you can be a giver to a fault for sure in that you don't want to offend anybody, right? And so being a giver doesn't mean you don't have boundaries,
Right.
or that you don't say no,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's probably the ones at the bottom say yes to everybody. They want to please everybody.
Yeah, because if you're ultimately a doormat, you're not going to be able to get the things done that you need to get done, right? Because somebody's taking advantage of you. You're over here, you're doing this for them, you're trying to get this fixed for somebody. And that's the lowest performing group of the givers.
Sure.
But the highest performing group of the givers are, like you said, have the firm boundaries.
Yeah.
They're focused on who they're giving to, why they're giving, how they're giving.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that reciprocal nature of their relationship, people want to deal. It's like we're playing a big game together. I want to know that you're going to treat me fairly.
Sure.
And that's the person I want to do business with.
Sure.
You know, again, ultimately, I don't care how talented, charismatic, successful you are. You know, ultimately, we're playing a game together, right?
Well, and think about, what are we giving, right? We're giving our knowledge, our expertise. We're giving our time, right? We're giving our resources. Well, if these are the things we own, right? This is our asset, are those things. We as givers should choose who to give that to, right? And so you view it that way. Who is, I hate to say this without sounding condescending, but who's worthy of my time, right? And I'm going to invest my time in areas that make the most impact.
Sure.
And so I'm not going to invest my time in someone who is going to, ignore it, or not appreciate it, or, take my advice and do something with it. I mean, what would be the point of that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's, I go back to real estate, but you can be let's take a real estate agent, for example, right? Because, I mean, the best real estate agents are givers, and they're servants, and they are devoted to helping these clients. But there are just some clients you can't help. Right? And so it is okay. You can be a giver as a real estate agent and let a client go.
Or just hold your boundaries, right?
Hold your boundaries,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's where in sales, I would say most people in sales just don't know what their boundaries are, right? And I remember one of my first business coaches I had, I was working just nonstop, and I would waste time. Obviously in sales you get paid a commission, so like the deal has to close, right? So it was identifying, are these serious people, right? Are they qualified to actually do this transaction?
Yeah.
Are they? Another one is so for me, my boundaries were, with a young family, were, well, hey, I'm not going to work weekends anymore. I'm not going to work after hours anymore. So if I had a client that was adamant about that, then I just gave him to somebody else, or told him I couldn't help him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's okay.
It's okay. And I think that's where the ones at the bottom feel this pressure to be all things to all people.
Yeah. And they can be burned out easily.
Easily. And I always tell my guys that, I told, I have my HVAC team right now, they're just in 120-degree attics all day and just working. I'm like, look, I'd rather you be rested and motivated for the next day than to work 2 extra hours and make us an extra $500. Like, let's just not take the $500.
Yeah.
So that you're rested the next day, right?
Yeah.
And so we had to have that permission and that freedom to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So one of the things that was interesting to me, and I mentioned this earlier, is just kind of how you can change between the two. But they talk about how you are influenced by the people in the setting, based off of you being a giver, matcher, or a taker, and this group pressure. Or he said that there's a correlation of being a giver and the similarity of who you're around. And so they use this example of there's an injured, they did this study, right? And they had an injured runner, or someone who had fallen down, right, around a group of Manchester United fans. And when he had a Manchester United jersey on, 92% of people stopped and helped him. And when he wasn't wearing the Manchester United jersey, 30% stopped and helped him. Isn't that crazy?
That's interesting.
Yeah, man, those Europeans.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's almost like a modern day, like Good Samaritan story, right?
Should have been a note in the story.
But yeah, so I mean, that's very interesting, though, isn't it?
Well, and the way I understood him break some of this down is using a one bad apple can spoil a bunch, and that if you've got a team of primarily givers and then you've got a taker, that taker can create paranoia within the group, and then that taker will do more collateral damage to the group than the group will do in pulling him up. And so I think what I'm taking out of the book, of course, you're always working on culture, you're always working on your team, and what I'm taking out of the book is because now I see it pretty clearly. I've had several folks that really fall into this taker mentality, and I can see the damage that they had done. Yep. And one of my favorite parts of the book, and so start the TikTok camera. He tells you how to identify a taker. Yeah. Do you remember what he says?
No.
Okay, I like this. So he says in an interview, if you want to spot a taker, one of the easiest ways to do this is to ask them, give me 4 examples of people in your career that you've helped become more successful. And he says more times than not, the takers will always point up, saying, I helped my boss get that new Ferrari. I helped my manager get a new house. I helped these people this way in the hierarchy. He says the best way to they will hardly ever reference down to say, hey, there was a new kid who came in, he didn't have any friends, I tried to help him, I tried to shepherd him and bring him along. And the point is that takers kiss up and kick down. And that, when he said that, I was like, holy cow, because then the Rolodex of folks in my mind I started going through them, recognizing that behavior of these people, to me, were, they presented themselves as the best, the best team member, the best manager, the best whoever. And then you would hear stories, or you would hear others come and say, hey, he just called me an idiot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he's my boss. Oh, yeah. And I'm going, he called you an idiot? And so you just knew right away. It's okay. Yeah. This is
and that is right, and I think that it takes on different forms. You would like to say, well, all takers are very extroverted and very speaking, and a lot of times they
can be very friendly,
and they take a very passive aggressive approach.
Yeah, fakers.
Their subordinates.
Yeah, he calls them fakers.
Yeah, and it's good stuff. So I think that this idea is that to become more successful, we have to be takers. But the studies show that the higher percentage of people in power and wealth are actually givers.
That's right.
Not saying a taker can't achieve that, right? Yeah. But just the majority.
Yeah.
And so, you think of that, and I remember reading something that said, hey, the modern day millionaire lives in a very modest home and drives like a F-150. Yeah. Right. And wears jeans every day. They're not these people that are blasting themselves and tooting their own horn.
Yeah. And we've talked about this a little bit before, where, these titans of industry, not all of them, but, we expect them to have the sharpest elbows and be the toughest and the most extroverted and the most commanding, like leading the charge. And a lot of times they're just people who can facilitate support for their team and care deeply about those who are subordinate to them in the hierarchy. Yeah. And I think, man, that makes so much more sense, because you want people to be pulling with you, and the only way to do that is to let them know that, hey, not only are we part of a team and we're part of something, but I actually do care about you, not just I kind of care about you. It's genuine.
Yeah. Another book we need to dig into is The $1 Trillion Coach. I think that's what it is. And Adam Grant references it. In fact, Adam Grant wanted to write a book about this guy, but he was still alive and wouldn't let him. And when he passed away, 2 other people had wrote a book about him, and he references a little bit. But he literally was on the board for Apple, Uber, all these real successful, and he was like one of their main board members, but like nobody knows who he was. He was like a former college football coach and nobody knows, right? But that was just him. He's just like 100%, a giver in everything he did. Let's see, I just put some notes here and we can talking points. Well, here's what I was going to say. A lot of my successes come from networking. And I know that has so many different connotations, right? And so what I did is when I I heard a guy say really, really early on. He says, you want to be the straw that stirs the drink, right? But you got to get all the ingredients into the cup.
Yeah.
And so I remember early on when I was in real estate, I'm like, okay, I have 30, 40 business professionals that I'm giving business to and have good relationships with. And so I just started doing these like monthly business lunches. And it's like, hey, I need you here, be here, I'll pay for your lunch. And they would just all show up, right? And some of them were competing, in the same industry, right? It's like, hey, y'all should know each other, this industry's tough. Y'all should be able to speak each other's same language, right?
Absolutely.
And so I just started doing that. Then it kind of evolved into a more formal when I started a B&I group. But you can identify, you go to a networking meeting, right? You can identify givers and takers really quickly.
How do you see that?
I think it's a lot of it's just in the conversation, right? I mean, I think givers tend to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah,
and
curiosity.
Take a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Give a lot of praise. Oh, wow, that's awesome, and not be like, oh, yeah, well, that's a good success story. Well, let me tell you about mine.
Yeah, one-upping.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that too 3 times. But, some people just can't help themselves, right? And it's just kind of like, and I can find myself doing that too, in times in some conversations. I'm like, man, am I talking about myself too much, or really just showing interest? And so I feel like that's kind of that's a good indicator in a casual, not in a formal interview session, you're interviewing somebody, but just in a formal conversation, are they asking questions? Do they seem interested? Are they giving praise?
I wonder, when I think about some of the folks that I can now clearly identify as takers, sometimes I would bounce this off my wife, dedicated non-listener to the pod, and she would say, they're very insecure.
Yeah.
And I would kind of go, no, they're brash and arrogant, and they're not insecure. But then the more that I kind of think about that and hearing about your story about somebody coming to the party and having to one up, or having to brag about their successes, do you think that it is an insecurity? Or
yeah, I mean, I think that we could even go back to our primal questions, right? That person's probably, am I good enough?
Yeah.
Am I successful? And they kind of feel this need to prove that they're successful, right? And I think some of that does come with time, just the older you get, the goal changes, or you have more clarity of what really matters.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think so. I think he actually calls that in this book, powerless conversation.
Powerless conversation.
Powerless conversation is what he calls it. He says givers engage in powerless conversation. And that is just as effective, if not more effective, as a powerful approach to dominate a conversation.
Yeah.
Seeking advice, asking questions, right? That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
When you have someone who is, more successful than you, and you're talking to them and they ask your opinion about something.
Yeah.
I mean, that is powerless,
That's big.
right? That is really stepping down and saying, hey, your opinion matters to me, even though I'm way more successful on paper than you.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone that stands out to me is when I was in college, I worked at a camp, and I was first year camp counselor. The head of the camp, this is a pretty big operation, older guy.
Was it a fat camp?
No, it was called Kanakuk. I don't know if you're familiar with that camp.
Missouri or
something.
Right.
Right. So we'd go up to around Branson, and I would work there. So I worked there 1 year. It was very hot, and there was no air conditioning. So
that was actually in shape camp. I didn't go. I didn't go to that one.
A lot of sweating.
A lot of outdoor activity.
That's right. Exactly right. Exactly right. So one of the things that really stood out to me about the camp leader is that when we were meeting, through conversation, he identified that I like to play guitar. And he played guitar as well. And he was really good. He was a very good guitar player. And I probably was not. Anyways, one of the things he said, he goes, well, I would love to hear you play. Maybe you can show me some things. And I was like, I've seen him play. And I was like, man, there's nothing I could show you at all. You're very, very good. Yeah. And he made the statement that says that usually no matter what the player's level is, I can always learn something from them. And I was just thinking like, wow, that still to this day makes an impact on me, of him clearly somebody very skilled with the mentality to say, I'm sure I can learn something from you.
Sure.
I'm here. I'm willing.
Yeah.
Rather than just going, yeah, hey, great. Thanks. You play guitar? Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, and, I think about even in our organization, it's like, how many times are we going to people at the bottom and saying, hey, do you have any ideas of how we can make this better?
Right.
Or even this culture of, if they do get an idea, that they have a platform to say it, right? And I would think that both of us would say, yeah, absolutely, that's allowed in our company. But do they know that it's allowed in the company?
Yeah.
Right? Have we empowered our people, to be critical of what we're doing?
Yeah. Well, one of the hardest problems with this that I see, and I've told folks this several times, it's like, look, I want everybody to bring ideas to me, but I want you to understand this. Please get this, that if I don't agree with you, or we don't pivot into this thing that you're suggesting, don't give up.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen is that, I feel like I've always had that posture, but if maybe I see things from a different vantage point, or maybe I'm not saying that I'm smarter or better, it's just that I've got a different lens of the situation. And that suggestion sounds really good, but it might not work because of X, Y, or Z. And so when it doesn't happen, that person goes, oh, well, that was just lip service. And you don't care. So I try to make a point that whenever anybody gives me a suggestion, that I say, listen, if I don't do this, don't give up. Keep bringing stuff because it may not work. It just might not.
And that's what, and I always bring this caveat in, is like, hey, the decisions we make or the changes we make are not because it's what I want to do. It's because it's what's best for the company.
That's right.
And all of the decisions we have to have are what's best for the company. And half of my ideas don't get taken.
Oh, that's right.
And so I'd say
I got a lot of bad ideas.
A lot of bad ideas. Well, but here's the thing: is you're talking about different perspectives, right? So that's why all of our big decisions are made in groups, because my managers have different perspectives. Like, I even bring managers that are managers of a whole different division to just listen in on the conversation, because they might have a different perspective or a different idea.
Yeah.
And that recently happened. We had several managers in the table, and someone who is just totally opposite said, hey, what if we did this? And we did it. You know? So, I think that's but I think that if you're, it depends on your mindset, right? Because you're giving up your authority, you're giving up your platform, you're falling on your sword a lot, right? And I do think that's characteristics of a giver for sure. So we talked about this earlier, but the biggest risk of a giver is burnout, trying to please everyone, getting it taken advantage of. And here's one thing that I wrote down: the burnout is not from the hours that they put in. It is from the inability to see the results or the impact that they've had. So, I think that's interesting, because I was thinking through that, and it makes sense why, Aaron was just on the podcast, but every time we have a session, we start off with what the wins are, right? Because, we have to celebrate the successes. That's the way to avoid burnout. Yeah. And so.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, everybody can feel used. Everybody can give to somebody, and you go, you know what? I'm just going in the wrong direction with this. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, and it's just not, that verse, ears to hear, eyes to see, comes to mind. Sometimes that's just the reality, and I get it. For anybody who's feeling burned out because they've given and they don't feel the reciprocity, they don't feel the fairness. That's such a human feeling. Like we all feel that.
Well, and I would even say this, man, voice that. You have two, right? So we go back to the controllables, right? We go back to the three circles. The outside circle are things we have to accept. Middle circle are things we can influence. But the middle is control, right? In between control and acceptance is influence, what we influence. But in that situation, if we feel we're not appreciated, we feel like this, we're not heard, voice that opinion. Like if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I feel like I don't have a voice, or that you don't care about what I think or whatever," I'm going to take that in, right?
Yeah.
I'll try not to be defensive. In the past, I've probably been defensive.
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, you got something about me? Good. Glad you called this
Guess
meeting.
what?
I got something about you." Yeah. How about we tidy up our office a little more?
That's
All
right.
Thank you. But no, I think that that's it, right? Because if someone is in that position and say that they have, they're low on the totem pole, they're not in the decision making, or, what do you have in your control to do? You can either play the victim and throw a pity party, or you can voice your concerns and your feelings, right? Now, once you've done that, it's on them to decide right? That's the outside circle is what you have to accept.
Yeah.
And what you have to accept is how they react to that news.
Right.
That's not on you.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
So that's really our choice. One of the last things that he says in the book, or one of the big things I remember him taking away, and again, I don't want to sound hypocritical because I know I haven't done this all the time, but it says, if there's an opportunity to help that will take you 5 minutes or less, never turn it down.
Yeah.
It's called the 5-minute rule.
Yeah.
If there's ever anything, anywhere you're at, if it's 5 minutes or less to help a situation, do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like that's a pretty good rule to have in place, right?
No,
if everybody did that.
That's right. That's right. I mean, different world.
Yeah.
But then too, there's something to. I remember there was a Saturday and I was off work, and maybe I wasn't feeling particularly good, unmotivated or whatnot, and my neighbor was having to move something from one place to another, and so I just said, "Hey, man, I don't really have anything to do," and I said, "Hey, you mind if I help you move this, whatever you're moving?"
Yep.
And so it took, 10, 15 minutes, and that act of service got me out of my own head. Because you're worrying about your problems and your issues and your stuff. And when you just go and help somebody, it's almost like that burden almost doesn't go totally away, but you feel relief from it.
Yeah.
You're helping somebody else. You're not just so self-obsessed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big win for a giver, is that ultimately it is rewarding.
Yeah.
Right? It is rewarding, and you don't have to just worry. It's like, just get out of your own way, go help somebody. And guess what? You will feel way better.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is for people that are busy like us, is leaving that capacity.
Yes.
Right? And that's a huge one. Think of how we've designed our homes, right? You can live in a tight-knit neighborhood and never see your neighbors.
That's right.
You go into your garage, shut the garage door, go in your house. You never see them.
That's right.
Privacy fence. Right now, we're putting the garages like in the back of the house. They don't even know, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
They don't even know if you're home or not.
Right.
And that is and that's just our culture.
Yeah.
And I think that being a giver, you just got to be around people. You got to be okay with engaging in people with people.
Connectivity, man.
Connectivity, and
the theme.
I think it starts. I think like most things, if you want to make a change, it starts in your home. Right. So if you want to change your finances, it starts with your personal budget. Right. And so same thing is, how are you budgeting your time?
Yeah.
The people around you, then it kind of grows from there. So yeah, man.
Good stuff on this book.
Good stuff.
I took a lot from it.
Hey, so I'm going to bring back some great pictures from Boston. I'll show you.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe some antiques.
So is there anything particular you want me to be looking for? But here's the thing. Y'all have a modest home and have like 6 things in there. So your wife is definitely a minimalist.
She is.
And it's like massive bookcase, 2 books. It's
but they're 2 very good books.
I'm like, that bookcase is functional. That should have 100 books. Okay, so I'm like, hey, what are we doing here? So
we need the Left Behind series at the very top.
Left Behind. Hey, Dead Air. Wasn't that the name of one of them?
I can't remember.
Okay, maybe not. So what I would say is, if I gift you an antique, I have a feeling of where that's going to end up.
Yeah, she won't.
Yep, back at the Grand Cane
That's
antique
right.
store.
That's right.
Gonna trade that
At the swap meet.
At the swap meet.
At the swap meet.
So,
Yeah.
Cool. Well, there we go. Nice to catch up.
Yeah, and so how about a shout out?
Exciting
do we have
stuff.
do we have a shout out here?
A shout out. Let's think about what is going on. Well, what type of shout out are you wanting?
I'm just trying to think, in the last couple of weeks, if I've been around a local business that.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned him being a listener, a supporter of our show, Andrew Elston.
Andrew Elston.
He's a great he's a contractor, specializes in pools, remodels. If you're in this town, you know the last name Elston.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably,
Great name.
Yep, because his dad is just a well-known high-end home builder, and Andrew's instills a lot of those values in his business.
Yeah.
And the reason I shout him out is because he was over at the house the other day, and he said, the way that we have a swimming pool and we have a hot tub built into the swimming pool. Okay. And last year or 2 years ago, around this time of the year, we go to swim. It's not a big pool, not much shade. We go to get in the pool and it's like 95 degrees. It's like not even worth swimming, or it's like taking a bath.
Yeah.
So we installed a chiller. Okay, I know it's bougie, but hey, look,
You live in Benton.
we swim every day. So
That's right.
the only way I can get my kids to play outside is at the pool. So I live in Benton. Okay, look, you can't fit. If you live in Benton, you got to have a pool, and you got to have a 3/4 ton truck. Okay.
Okay. Yes,
So
that's
got
true.
Both of those.
That's
Don't
true.
pull anything, but I got one. Okay. So anyway, so we have a chiller, and he's like, hey, if you upgrade your panel, you can turn your chiller you can turn your hot tub into a cold plunge.
No.
Yes. And so me and Laurie are doing this kind of a cleanse, like this 90-day carnivore diet. We have a home gym, working out, just doing the right things. And cold plunging, you've heard about it. It's the fad. It's the fad,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And so I was like, well, we've chilled the pool, and the coldest I can get the pool is like 80 degrees, right? I mean, it's like you can't get it. So I said, this ain't going to work. So the first night, I set it to come on at like midnight at 50 degrees. And sure enough, I get up, try to jump in at 6 a.m. It is 50 degrees, dude. It was so cold. I thought we were both about to die. We lasted 45 seconds.
Please, can I get a video
So
of this?
So now
50 degrees.
Now we've done some research. We probably could have killed ourselves.
That's too low.
To start with.
Yeah. What temperature do you start with?
So you really want to be 50 to 60 degrees. Anything above 60 is not therapeutic. Like there's no benefits really to you, other than makes you not hot anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a benefit
Which is
here.
good.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
With electricity being out from the storm,
That's
we
right.
didn't have it one day. And I worked out and I sweat for the next like 8 hours just through my clothes. It helps with that. So therapeutic, you want to be below 60, 50, 60, but really to maximize benefits, you want to be below 50, and you want to be up to your chin. You want to get your thyroid under the water.
Oh my gosh.
So we allow, right now, we're 2 weeks in. We're still, this morning we're at 60 degrees. We're working our way down. Okay. We start at 65, working our way down. We give ourselves 1 minute to ease in before we start the 5-minute timer. And so, it's 5 minutes.
So how about a pod in the cold plunge?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe
Let's
a
do it.
2-minute.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah, so it's interesting. So look, hey, we use the hot tub some, people think of a hot tub being as romantic. Laurie doesn't necessarily want to be close to me in the hot tub. I'll tell you what, the cold plunge, she wants to snuggle up.
That's right.
Snuggle up.
That's right.
Okay.
Romance, buddy.
Romance, right
That's
there.
The cold plunge.
6 a.m.
Wow.
60-degree
You
weather.
know what? My eyes have been opened.
So you open, So, they have all these standalone. I mean, look, Jordan,
yeah.
does he have a hot tub?
He does. He does. Yeah. But
Hey.
his whole pool is a hot tub right now. All of it.
He needs a chiller.
He does.
That's what I'm saying.
He does.
He needs a chiller.
Okay.
And
So-
then cold plunge.
So shout out to Andrew.
Andrew Elston.
Elston.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good guy.
Great
Look,
guy.
we know a bunch of pool plumbers. I mean, pool builders and contractors, and there's some great ones out there.
Yeah.
But in particular, he did help me, gave me the idea, upgraded my panel for me.
There you go.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, man. So
Cool.
good to see you, and
Yeah, we'll be back.
we'll be back.